Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 1 Episode 5 review of the new Scooby Doo movies. So last time I continued my playthrough of the 2018 Spider-Man video game with the release of Part 11 of my Let's Play, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. It hasn't been uploaded yet at the time of recording this, but I still hope you guys enjoyed that video regardless. But of course today I will be covering Season 1 Episode 5 of the new Scooby Doo movies, titled Guess Who's Not Coming to Dinner?, which was released on October 7th, 1972. The short synopsis of the episode is, the kids stop at Moody Manor to ask for directions, but they find Homer Pipsqueak, a detective on the search for the missing Captain Moody, and they get mistaken for Moody's nieces and nephews. So as per usual, I will be watching Season 1 Episode 5 of the new Scooby Doo movies on the new Scooby Doo movies, the Almost Complete Collection. This has every episode of the new Scooby Doo movies and has good special features. It just is missing one episode, and that's the Addams Family episode. If you want to know why that is the case, I kind of go a little more in depth on that review in my intro section of that episode. But yes, today's guest star is Don Knotts. I'm sure most of you probably don't know who Don Knotts is, unless if you're part of my older audience who, were around in the 60s or 70s. If you're someone my age or younger, you probably don't know who Don Knotts is. However, Don Knotts should be at least a familiar face to my subscribers who have been here for a while, because he's in the Scooby Doo Night of 100 Frights video game, which I've done a Let's Play on my channel. I haven't completed it yet, but Don Knotts is in that video game, and he plays the groundskeeper. So for those who don't know who Don Knotts is, here's just a quick rundown of who Don Knotts is. Like I always do with every episode, I like to go through the guest star and kind of give you guys an understanding of who is joining the gang today. Don Knotts was an American comedic actor who was born on July 21st, 1924 in Morgantown, West Virginia. In 1953, he would begin his acting career where he played a series regular on a TV show called Search for Tomorrow, which ran from 1953 to 1955. So here's a quick rundown of some of Don Knotts' most memorable roles, which include an episode of The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis called Rockabye Dobie, which, fun fact for you, Dobie Gillis was the inspiration for the cast of Scooby-Doo, so that's a nice little tie-in for that. The Andy Griffith Show, where he played series regular Barney Fife. An episode of the Joey Bishop Show called Joey's Hideaway Cabin, where he once again played Barney Fife. An episode of Mayberry RFD called Andy and Helen Get Married, where he also once again played Barney Fife. The Don Knotts Show, which he hosted for 22 episodes. An episode of the new Andy Griffith Show called My Friend the Mayor, where he again played Barney Fife. An episode of The Muppet Show where he played himself. The TV special The Muppets Go Hollywood, where he plays himself again. A show called Three's Company, where he played a series regular called Ralph Furley. An episode of Inspector Gadget called Ghost Catchers. The TV movie Return to Mayberry, where he plays Barney Fife again. 2 episodes of Garfield and Friends. 2 episodes of Johnny Bravo, where he plays himself. An episode of That 70s Show called Stone Cold Crazy. And a nice tie-in to the last review, where he was also in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World with Jonathan Winters. And he was, of course, in Chicken Little. At the time of this episode, he wasn't really doing anything major for his career. He was just doing a couple of guest appearances as either himself or a character on different shows. So he didn't have anything major going on in his career at the time this episode aired. Sadly, Don Knotts has since passed away. He passed away on February 24th, 2006, with his final role being the direct-to-video movie Air Buddies. So that's who Don Knotts is, but what's my experience with him? I, once again, am personally not a fan of Don Knotts. I've never been a huge fan of his media outside of Scooby-Doo. My only exposure to him is, of course, the Scooby Doo Night of 100 Frights video game, where he plays the groundskeeper. But really, the only thing outside of Scooby Doo I know him from is Chicken Little, where he voiced Mayor Turkey Lurkey. I saw Chicken Little when I was young and when it came out. So I didn't know he voiced the character in that movie, so that's kind of cool. But that's really the only exposure I have to him outside of Scooby-Doo. So once again, like Jonathan Winters, this is going to kind of be a new experience for me. I don't really have, any attachment to Don Knotts. But I want to ask you guys, what's your experience with Don Knotts? Are you a huge fan of Don Knotts? Are you not really a huge fan with him? What's your relationship with him? Are you, I like to know, so comment down below and let me know. Now, as far as this episode goes, I believe most fans consider this episode to be one of, if not the best episodes of the new Scooby Doo movies. I've heard it ranked pretty highly among the Scooby Doo community, as one of the better episodes of the new Scooby Doo movies, so it sounds like we have some high hopes going in. But is this truly a pretty good episode? Have we found the gold standard of the new Scooby Doo movies? Well, why don't we take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the new Scooby Doo movies. The episode begins with the gang in the Mystery Machine heading down a spooky road during a thunderstorm. They're trying to get to Pinecrest Lodge, but find an old gate which has a sign hanging over it reading Moody Manor. Velma gets out and pushes the gate down because they want to ask for... the gang heads to the old mansion to ask for directions because they're lost and they can't find this lodge. The Mystery Machine stops because a tree has fallen about halfway up the drive, and the gang is forced to walk. They don't realize that Don Knotts, disguised as an elderly lumberjack, is following them. He hides behind things and cackles, but then he sneezes and his facial hair and wig fall off, revealing that he's Don Knotts. He quickly puts everything back on and follows the gang. Scooby happens to look behind and sees Don Knotts sneezing again, with the same effect. Scooby did a similar thing with the tree, where he tried to say that the tree went back up, which I don't know if that was Don Knotts or something else, but I assume it was Don Knotts in that tree that made it go back up, because it went from fallen to up, and the gang didn't believe him. But then when Scooby sees Don Knotts again, Scooby then tries to convince the gang, but Don Knotts is gone, so the gang think he's losing it and don't believe that Don Knotts is actually there. Once they reach the mansion, everyone goes in and the door closes behind them. Don Knotts is in his changing room and switches to a butler outfit, and he calls himself Featherstone. He comes out of a panel in the wall and mistakes them for coming to see Captain Moody, believing that they're the Captain Moody's nieces and nephews. Captain Moody is the man in the portrait hanging over the fireplace, and Featherstone reveals that Captain Moody isn't there, but Featherstone rushes off to get the captain's good friend, Phineas. The gang then proceed to try and find a secret exit, and Don Knotts changes into his Phineas costume. Scooby ends up hitting a secret lever in a room, and a bookshelf opens to reveal a secret passage. The passage is very dark and spooky, and a spider scares Shaggy and Scooby. I would imagine so. It was a huge spider, or it looked like a huge spider. Everyone runs out of there but comes to a dead end, and the floor opens up and they fall through a trap door, leaving them in the room where they started. So Phineas comes out of the same panel in the wall and shouts orders at all of them, and Phineas mistakes all of them, including Scooby, for Captain Moody's nieces and nephews. He even name-drops some of the nieces and nephews. Except for Shaggy, he just says that Shaggy's the spitting image of Captain Moody. He then leads them to dinner where nobody eats anything because they speculate that it's poison, which I don't know why the gang would suspect that this food is poison. Sure, this is a stranger and they don't know his intentions, but to go right to poison, for Velma to go right to poison as well as Fred and Daphne, it just felt like a stretch. Like, they don't even know this person. For all they know, this could be a good person just trying to serve them a good meal. And why would he want to poison Captain Moody's supposed nieces and nephews? So it was a very strange stretch for the gang to just say that the food was poisoned. So they lie and they say they're too full, and Phineas calls the maid over to take them to their rooms. Don Knotts in his Phineas costume changes into his maid costume and comes out of the same panel Phineas and Featherstone did. And I believe his maid costume's name is Helga. Or maybe I might be misremembering that. It could just... it could be the same. I could be thinking of Nowhere to Hide, but I believe it was Helga. If not, they probably didn't say her name. I don't know. The gang thinks the people they met so far are somehow related. They don't clue together that this is the same person dressing up in different costumes, but they suspect that something's going on and that they possibly might be related. So Fred, Shaggy, and Scooby walk into their room where the maid is living, and shows them to their quarters, while Daphne and Velma obviously get their own room down the hall. And Daphne argues with Velma about turning the lights off, and then the power goes out from the storm. Luckily, Shaggy finds a candle. A lighthouse cuckoo clock, the foghorn, scares Shaggy and Scooby, though. And then they hear Phineas, or Don Knotts, pacing outside the bedrooms, keeping their first watch as he promised earlier. Something interesting, too, was seeing Fred read a horror book, which was really cool. I like seeing Fred, being interested in horror. And he even gives Shaggy and Scooby a chance to read it. And it seems like Scooby's either scared by it or he's scared by something else. But it's a really nice little tidbit that Fred likes horror novels. Either that or he's just passing the time with whatever book he could come up with. The storm gets worse and the thunder gets much louder. So Shaggy and Scooby then decide to go look for some food because they're Shaggy and Scooby. They're hungry. Fred warns them about going to get food because he still for some reason believes that it's poison, and he says I wouldn't touch any of that food. It tries to deter them from doing it, but Shaggy makes a great point saying it can't all be poison. I mean, Phineas and the butler and the maid got to eat too, which yeah, they do. They can't poison all the food, but also why would they poison food for their nieces and nephews? That doesn't make any sense, Fred. Why are you making this leap in logic? Velma and Daphne also follow them, but they don't see each other because Velma and Daphne are also very hungry too. Velma is especially hungry. She wanted Daphne to get a huge meal for her. So they must have not eaten all day or something because they were starving. There's even some points where Velma's voice comes out of Daphne, and I think that one of the times it happens in the Mystery Machine in the beginning of the episode. But it also happens in this scene when Velma and Daphne are going to get food, and Velma steps on a wood board and gets scared by it. And then, Velma and Daphne mistake Shaggy and Scooby for something scary and run back to their rooms. Shaggy and Scooby, realize that it's just a mirror, or they believe it's a mirror because there was a mirror in the section they were hiding in. So they continue moving, and a living suit of armor also confuses Scooby, because, Scooby doesn't know why this living suit of armor is just moving. And Shaggy doesn't notice the armor blow out his candle, and then blow it back, and then light it back on. Like I said, though, they eventually, Shaggy, Scooby, Daphne, Velma run into each other, and Velma and Daphne race back to their room thinking something scary, and Shaggy and Scooby go downstairs and make themselves very large sandwiches. But they get scared by Don Knotts disguised as Captain Moody's ghost, and they also run back to their rooms. What a waste of sandwiches, man. I just seeing that makes me hungry. I feel bad that Shaggy and Scooby didn't get to have their snacks. Or meals, rather, because it looks like a meal more than a snack. The ghost appears in their room, and Fred, Shaggy, and Scooby all race out of there. And the interesting thing about this scene is when Shaggy and Scooby explain to Fred what happened, and Fred's questioning them, the ghost pops up, Shaggy and Scooby get scared and want to run away. Fred, being an absolute hypocrite, he says he tells Shaggy and Scooby to stand up to the ghost, but as soon as the ghost comes close to him, he runs out like a scaredy cat. So Fred is I don't know what's going on with him. He's making broad assumptions about things. He thinks the food's poison when it's not. He's telling Shaggy and Scooby to stand up for themselves, but he runs out like a scaredy cat like them, and I don't blame him for doing so, but don't tell someone to stand up for themselves when you aren't going to do the same thing, Fred. That's very hypocritical. They go into the girls' room where they also are scared by the ghost, and the ghost switches back and forth between looking like an actual ghost and Don Knotts in disguise. They then chase through various doors and various doors in a hallway before the gang rejoins in a room and barricades the door. I like the door chase scene because it's actually one of the first, if not the first cases, where we see the door and doors in the hallway gag of Scooby Doo. Normally, I think people assume this happened in Where Are You, but I don't remember this happening in Where Are You. Whereas this is probably the first time we get to see Shaggy, Scooby, Fred, Daphne, and Velma, as well as the ghosts, running around through doors and corridors, and starting that trope of Scooby Doo. And I like it. I think it's a great scene, and is really entertaining.
It's the ghost of the man in the painting downstairs.
Captain Moody!
Beware, I have come back for revenge. The guilty one must die. Beware, I have come back for revenge.
So Fred's at the bookshelf, trying to find out what he can about ghosts, maybe seeing if he can, find a way to get rid of the ghost. And it's actually nice seeing Fred, Daphne, and Velma being open about ghosts. And the bookshelf turns around, revealing the ghost, while Fred, gets locked behind whatever secret passageway the ghost came through. But Fred comes back around through another secret passageway, wiping the hat and wig off the ghost, to which Don Knotts quickly disappears into the passage. So with the gang cluing in that there's clearly something going on, and, it's probably something that has to do with the butler, the maid, and Phineas, Freddy rings for the maid, and Don Knotts hastily puts on the Featherstone costume. But, Fred tells him we wanted a maid, and he then returns wearing a little bit of both costumes, and they all realize that he's faking it. So Don Knotts comes clean and rips off the wig to reveal his true self, much to Scooby's delight. And there's a bit of, inconsistency with Don Knotts that I'll get onto in my outro. But Don Knotts Don Knotts pretends to be a private eye named Detective Homer Pipsqueak, and dons a Sherlock Holmes-esque detective outfit, which I actually think is pretty cool. I like seeing a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes-type outfit. It looks good on him, complete with a pipe and a magnifying glass, just like Sherlock Holmes, and me being a fan of Sherlock Holmes, I do appreciate that. Once Don Knotts, or Detective Homer Pipsqueak, realizes that the gang are right about them not being Captain Moody's nieces and nephews, he basically reconstructs the crime, getting the gang up to speed on why he's here and what happened to Captain Moody. He tells them that he got a phone call from Captain Moody this morning and that he rushed there. He couldn't find Captain Moody, who was missing. And he tries to get the gang to admit that they're his nieces and nephews, but they don't budge, like I said. The gang are questioning him further, saying, "Why do you suspect the nieces and nephews?" And he tells them the motive, that each kid gets a share of a piece of his estate when he dies, a piece of his fortune. He splits them all up into groups when the gang, offer their services to him, and he obliges. And he trains Scooby to be a bloodhound. Scooby does sniff the sock of Captain Moody and tries to go off in a certain direction, Don Knotts thinks that he might have found the trail, but then he realizes that Scooby led him to the captain's socks, and he tells him to follow the trail of Captain Moody, to which Scooby ends up doing. And Daphne and Velma go and search the graveyard of Moody Manor, which is pretty creepy. And Fred and Shaggy investigate the mill and the mine shaft. So Shaggy goes to check the old mine on the hill in the back. He finds the ghost, but who he thinks is just Pipsqueak again. He later comes along, though, and finds Don Knotts and Scooby, and then he realizes that the ghost is an actual ghost. And then as soon as they run away, Fred's also with the ghost, because Fred must have assumed the same thing, that he was Pipsqueak. And now there's two ghosts chasing them, and it chases them back to the house. And I like this scene because we get the first reveal of the actual villains of the episode. And it's just a fun, nice little chase scene, to be quite honest.
Why are you making like that, Ghost, again? Well, anyway, I'm glad you showed up. It's spooky out here alone. Oh, hi, Mr. Pipsqueak. I'll be right back as soon as I walk back to the house with you and you! Yike! Two ghosts! Ghosts! Run!
Everyone suspects something is going on at the mill because they find it odd that Captain Moody has two ghosts. There can't be two ghosts of him. And Scooby was leading a trail to the mine, and the ghosts were driving away driving the gang and Don Knotts and Scooby away from, the mine shaft and the mill. So they realize something's going on down there. So everyone goes down there, and Don Knotts, or Detective Pipsqueak, ask the gang for two volunteers to go out and trick the ghost into capturing them. No one in the gang wants to step up, but Scooby, being a big fan of Don Knotts, decides that he wants to be the hero, and Shaggy, not wanting to be a bad friend and not wanting to leave him, to fend off for himself, he decides to be nice and volunteers himself as well. This just goes to show why Shaggy and Scooby are actually the bravest of the gang, because they'll do shit like this, where Fred, Daphne, and Velma won't even bother to do it. They then find Captain Moody in a minecart, and they drop the ghost into a separate minecart when Shaggy and Scooby lure the two ghosts into the minecart, and they rescue Captain Moody, and the ghost turn out to be the captain's nephews, who arrived a day early. The gang and Homer Pipsqueak, or Don Knotts, as I like to call him, because that's really who he is, joins Captain Moody for dinner later that night. And the episode ends with them asking for the directions they came for, but Moody is unable to give the directions, and, Don Knotts is also unable to give the directions, so they're pretty much back to where they started, but they did help solve a mystery and keep a man from dying, so that's at least something good. But unfortunately, they're still lost at the end of the episode, but Don Knotts tells them Scooby can help. You have Scooby, and he can help you get through the way, which maybe he can, but who knows. I'm going to give Season 1, Episode 5 of the new Scooby Doo Movies 5 stars out of 5. So yeah, this truly is the gold standard of the new Scooby Doo Movies, at least for now. This is the top episode. This is topped Batman and Robin. I'm not joking. This is a 5 out of 5 episode. I really like this episode, and it's really great. So since this is a 5 out of 5 episode, we'll start off with the negatives of the episode, and there's only one minor negative that holds it back from being a perfect episode. And that is that we don't get to see the nephews outside of costume. We hear their names dropped, we know of their existence because Don Knotts talks about it, but we never get to see the nephews outside of costume, so it kind of takes away a little bit because it could have been a more solid mystery had we seen them beforehand. so that we would get to know them and be able to guess them. But still, that's only one minor dent on the episode, and it doesn't hinder my enjoyment of the episode. I still very much like it. So that's all I got for negatives. Let's go on to the heaps of positives that I have for this episode. So starting with the positives, we have some minor positives first. The first minor positive I have is the clues. I think the clues were pretty good. I think they helped forward the mystery a little bit, but they didn't help point towards a suspect. There was really only one clue, and that was Captain Moody's socks, which gave Scooby a way to follow Captain Moody's trail and eventually find him. So it helped forward the mystery, and it helped find where the captain was, thanks to Scooby. But besides that, there weren't any actual clues. Sure, Don Knotts was looking for clues, but there weren't actually any clues in the episode, besides that one. However, it doesn't really hurt my enjoyment of it because it at least serves some type of function in the episode. It at least helps forward the mystery. It may not have, helped in the suspect department like it usually should, but it was good enough. Like, it helped forward the mystery. It did what it needed to, so I'll give it a pass on that front. Another minor positive of the episode is the motive of the villains. So the motive of the villains is pretty good and pretty unique enough that it works as a good money motive, but it also is a little bit similar to a previous Scooby-Doo episode. That being What the Hex is Going On from Scooby Doo Where Are You, Season 1, Episode 6. The reason I say that is because it's kind of similar to the Family Fortune, motive, but it's unique enough because, unlike Uncle Stuart, where he was just trying to scare them to get the money, these guys, the nephews, actually had to kill their uncle to get his money. So they were willing to do a very dark deed just to get some money, and to be quite honest, that makes them pretty dangerous villains and pretty evil and malicious ones, that they're willing to kill a family member just for his money. So it's a pretty good, unique enough motive because of the intentions of the villain, obviously, but it's a different kind of one. Like, Uncle Stuart was more family fortune. This one's kind of like more, money that's passed on after a family member dies, like in a will or an estate or something like that. Sort of similar, but unique enough to where it works. It's not that bad of a motive, and I like it. And the last minor positive I have is the amount of suspects in the episode. So, the number of suspects in this episode are good in a way, because I like that Captain Moody's nieces and nephews were name-dropped, and they were mentioned. We even got to hear one of the names of the nephews, which was Ronald, which I think was supposed to be like a joke or a callback to how Fred was originally going to be called Ron in the original Scooby Doo Where Are You series, but they changed that. They never gave... Don Knotts never mentioned who the other nephew's name was. He just said Shaggy was the spitting image of Captain Moody. So, we never found out the other nephew's name. We did find out the nieces' names, which I forget because they really weren't that important anyways. So I like the name drop. I like that they were mentioned and we knew of their existence. But again, I would have preferred had we actually physically seen them. Had the nephews and the nieces been there and had we actually seen them, it could have been a nice, could have been a good enough mystery to where you would be wondering which of these, family members are doing it. Could it be two of the nephews, two of the nieces, or one of the pair, or a nephew and a niece combined together? There's many combinations between the four that could have worked. So we got the name drop, we got the mention, but again, I would have preferred to have seen them, but it still works. Like, at least they were mentioned and name dropped, so it didn't come out of nowhere like, who the fuck are these two? Like, we at least knew of the nephew's existence, so it wasn't out of the blue. We just didn't see them before then. Now let's get into the major positives of the episode, the stuff that really makes it good. So of course, we'll start off with the gang themselves. The gang as a whole in this episode, they all have great chemistry with each other, and were very sassy and funny as well in this episode. I really love the back and forth between them. Starting with Fred. Fred was a good leader in this episode. He did split a little bit of leadership when Don Knotts revealed himself, and we found out that he wasn't really the villain, and that he was actually a good guy, that he had good intentions, and he kind of took charge a little bit, Don Knotts, but Fred mostly took a lot of the charge in this episode and was a good leader. And we got to see him scared in this episode and more open to the idea of ghost, which was nice. Fred wasn't as skeptical in this episode and was actually open to the idea. He's like, yeah, maybe this is an actual ghost. Maybe we can figure out how to get rid of it. And we saw him run out of the room when he saw the ghost and got scared. So it was nice to see that side of Fred, showing that the rest of the gang can be scared and cowardly as well. It's just not all the time. Shaggy and Scooby are usually the primary ones, which is okay. And Fred, Daphne, and Velma, they put on a braver face, but they do have their moments of being fearful and scared, and sometimes being cowardly. Next, we have Daphne. Daphne was pretty cowardly and scared in this episode. She actually was very frightened in this episode. She didn't really like the look of Moody Manor. She didn't even want to turn out the lights in the room. She, thought the food was poison. She was scared of everything in this episode. And she didn't even like looking in the graveyard with Velma. She was on her toes, I'll say that. She definitely was on Shaggy and Scooby's level in this episode, where she was much more scared and more on edge. Which was nice, because we don't get to see that side of Daphne often. Then we have Velma. Velma was pretty sassy in this episode. She was also scared in this episode, and she was also open to the idea of ghost. And she even got to be a bit hungry in this episode. She was very hungry in this episode. She channeled a lot of her inner Shaggy and Scooby because she was very hungry. There were times where she was cowardly and scared. Not as much as Daphne and Shaggy and Scooby, but her and Fred had a little bit of fear and a little bit of cowardice, and they were more open to the idea of ghost. And for Velma, that's especially great, because normally she's the one that's always debunking it, saying, no, ghosts aren't real, they don't exist. In this episode, she was pretty open to the idea that this might actually be a real ghost. And I liked seeing that side of Velma. It was nice, it was unique, and it was good. She didn't get to play her usual role of piecing together the mystery, because there wasn't really much clues, and she really couldn't do anything based on what she had. But she fulfilled other roles to where I didn't feel like she was useless in this episode. In fact, she was great. And finally, we have Shaggy and Scooby. Shaggy and Scooby were great in this episode. They were their usual funny, cowardly selves. And they were a bit brave in this episode. The fact that they were willing to step up for Don Knotts to be bait for the two Captain Moody ghosts was pretty good. It actually, was good on their part, because it shows, especially in the earlier series, that Shaggy and Scooby are braver than we think they are. And I like seeing moments like that. I don't want to see it all the time. I like when it's more natural bravery. And this time it was natural, because Scooby was doing it because of his admiration for Don Knotts, and Shaggy was doing it because of his friendship and willingness to, to stick by his buddy and not do it by himself. Then we have the guest star, Don Knotts. How was our guest star this week? Well, Don Knotts was actually pretty good in this episode. He was a good guest star. He helped forward the mystery, and he was a good leader. He wanted to help find the captain. He knew all the information. He was looking for the clues. And he told every member of the gang where to go, what to do. He played a lot of the leadership role when he eventually revealed himself. Now, something about Don Knotts in this episode is very weird and inconsistent. And maybe you guys can clear it up for me. So the episode obviously says that Don Knotts is guest starring, and his last name is even in the title. And Scooby recognizes Don Knotts early in the episode, and when Don Knotts reveals himself, Scooby recognizes him as Don Knotts, and Don Knotts says that's not the case, and that he's Homer Pipsqueak. The rest of the gang don't even identify him as Don Knotts. They don't even think he is Don Knotts. So, the inconsistency that I, want to bring up is Don Knotts really playing himself? Or is he playing a lookalike? Because it's not really clear. Like, is this actually Don Knotts, and he's just still pretending, and he's giving a false identity because he doesn't want to reveal that he's Don Knotts to the gang? So he gives the false identity of Homer Pipsqueak? Or is his name actually Homer Pipsqueak, and he just looks like Don Knotts? I gotta admit, it's a weird inconsistency. I personally like to believe that it is Don Knotts, and that he's not really playing a character called Homer Pipsqueak. I mean, I think in a way he kind of is. He's faking an identity, but I think that I would like to believe that truly is Don Knotts, because the episode says so, and that he's just lying about his identity, but the gang don't catch on except for Scooby. And I don't know why. Maybe he doesn't want to reveal his identity to them. But it's a weird thing. So can you guys let me know in the comments section, what do you believe about this episode? Do you think this is Don Knotts and he's just lying about his identity to the gang? Or is he a lookalike, somebody that looks like Don Knotts and his true name is Homer Pipsqueak? It's a weird inconsistency for sure. But still, regardless, Don Knotts, which is what I'm going to refer to him, because that's who he is, not Homer Pipsqueak, even though that's the character he plays. This is Don Knotts guest starring. He was a good guest star in this episode, regardless of the inconsistency. Good leadership, good. He helped forward the mystery, really good guest star, probably the strongest one yet, and I was really impressed with him. I think he did a great job in this episode. He didn't really play off any of the gang members really particularly well, besides maybe Scooby. The rest of the gang, he didn't really have much chemistry with the gang, so I guess he doesn't really have that. But he played off the gang well enough, and in each member of the gang got moments to shine with Don Knotts, so I feel like it was fine. And plus he did other things to, help, he helped forward the mystery, and he was a good leader, so I feel like that is a good enough, I feel like that was good enough for him. It makes up for the lack of chemistry he has with the members of the gang. And then we have the villains of the episode, and yes, I'm going to refer to them as villains, not one singular villain, because there's two. Both are the ghost of Captain Moody, the two ghosts of Captain Moody. I really like the two ghosts of Captain Moody. I think it's great. It's very creepy. I love the whole moaning, screaming face design. And I love the maniacal laugh that it has. Like, you could tell it's very, very malicious and not a good kind of laugh. It was very, psychotic kind of laugh. And seeing the moaning and screaming face, it just is, not a great... You wouldn't want to be chased by this guy. The only time I would say it was bad was when Don Knotts dressed up as the ghost, which is very odd that both Don Knotts and these nephews had the idea of dressing as Captain Moody's ghost. I didn't like that Don Knotts' version kept blinking in and out, but I guess that's to show that was Don Knotts faking it, because I guess if they hadn't shown that, maybe the audience would have questioned, was that the nephews, or was that Don Knotts? But still, it wasn't a great look. I much prefer when it's simply a transparent, ghost. But I kind of maybe get why they did it. But it doesn't mean I like it. I didn't like the way Don Knotts dressed as it. But the actual villains of the episode, they look great. Really love them. The mystery was really good in this episode. I really liked the mystery of this episode. So you have this mystery that's pretty good and engaging, and it was a dark mystery. This is not a light mystery. This is another dark Scooby Doo mystery Because the whole mystery is we don't know where Captain Moody is. We don't know where the owner of this house is. And you can say that the mystery didn't really kick off until maybe the second half of the episode, because Don Knotts was fooling around with the gang for the first half because he believed that they were the nephews and nieces of Captain Moody. But still, I would argue that mystery was throughout. Like, I think even the gang were questioning it in the beginning, like, where Captain Moody was, so that they could prove that they weren't the nephews and nieces of Captain Moody. And what's even great about the mystery is that when Don Knotts gives the details of it, it adds even more to the mystery, because it's like, what happened to him? And if he is dead, if Captain Moody is dead and he's gone, how did he die? Like, who did he die? Like, who killed him? Like, is there a possible murder in the house? Like, that makes the episode great. The fact that there could be an evil person doing a dark deed, such as murdering this captain at his own mansion. It was definitely one of the darkest mysteries we've had yet in the new Scooby Doo movies. Definitely the darkest of the new Scooby Doo movies. Really good, really engaging. I really like it. I love the mystery of, what happened to Captain Moody, and if he's dead, how did he die? Did he die from somebody else? Did he die of just natural causes or something like that? What happened to him? Finally, we have the atmosphere and setting of the episode, which were both great in my opinion. The atmosphere was great because it was filled with tension and suspense because of a stormy night, along with the implication that there may be a murderer in the house or someone who is evil with ill intent. The fact that there might be somebody who committed a dark deed, such as murdering this man in his own house, and they didn't finish the job. Like, they had Captain Moody there. I don't know why they waited so long. I guess they realized, Don Knotts was there, and the gang were there, and they couldn't, go forward with killing him until they were gone and out of the way. But if they were willing to kill this guy, I wouldn't put it past them to even want to kill the gang and Don Knotts just because they're there and witnesses. Maybe if push came to shove, they probably would have done that, and that really creates a great atmosphere because you got these two evil men who may or may not have murdered this guy, their uncle, and committed a dark deed. And who knows what they're capable of? They could kill the gang and Don Knotts and might not even care, and they could get away with it. Or they could scare them away and it could work, and they could still get away with it. It really creates a dark, atmosphere for the episode, and really fills you with tension and suspense because you fear for the gang's safety as well as Don Knotts, because you're wondering, Don Knotts is obviously an older professional, but can the gang handle such a dark mystery like this with someone who is this evil with ill intent and is willing to do anything, even murder their own family member just for their money? And finally, the setting of the episode was really great as well. I really think it worked so well. Like, I liked Moody Manor. I liked that it was a secluded manor out in the middle of nowhere, cut off from society, and it was very isolated. It was like a gated, it had gates all around it, it was secluded, who knows how far his neighbors are. He's got a graveyard and a mill and a mine shaft along with his own mansion. He's got tons of woods surrounding his house. I mean, this is just a perfect place for a crime or, a murder to be committed, and nobody would ever know. And it almost happened. The fact that the nephews were this close to killing Captain Moody is insane. Thankfully, the gang put a stop to it, and so did Don Knotts, and saved Captain Moody from a fate like that. But the setting really works. It really works. It's a good Scooby-Doo setting. I don't know if we've had secluded manors before. We might have. We've had secluded locations before, and maybe A Night of Fright No Delight is probably one that comes to mind, on an island surrounded by ocean. But this one's just as creepy. Like, it maybe not as strong as that, but it definitely is on that same level of, you know, of creepiness and risk factor, being out in the middle of nowhere, and the fact that the gang are lost and they don't know where they are, and something evil could happen and they may never be heard from again. It's a great setting. I really enjoy it. I think it's good. Overall, guys, I would recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. I really do believe that this is the best episode of the new Scooby Doo movies. By far, it's beaten Batman and Robin. It is the best one so far. It has everything you want in a Scooby Doo episode. A great mystery. The gang are on top form. The guest star is really good. The atmosphere and setting are strong. The villains are strong. You know, just everything worked in this episode. And if you guys haven't watched this episode, go and see it. It's a really good episode, and it's a fun one. Even if you don't know who Don Knotts is, this is a good episode. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you think it's one of the best, if not the best, of the new Scooby Doo movies like me? I think it's a really good, really, you know, amazing episode. Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested to hear that take as well. Are you not big on this episode? Do you think it's, you know, not as good and maybe I'm being too positive with it? Or are you somewhere in the middle where you think it's just okay, but it's nothing special, it's not good, it's not bad? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby-Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, I'll have plenty more Scooby-Doo content on the way. Of course, we will have a re-review of Scooby Doo Warrior Season 1 Episode 1. I am going to go through with that because I put a poll on my community tab and you guys have spoken and you guys really want that. So I will be doing the first 10 episodes. And of course, I'll be doing more of the new Scooby Doo movies. You can also follow me on Facebook where I have discussions about things we talked about in both my channels, and Twitch where I hope to live stream in the future. So in my next video, I originally planned to continue the Spider-Man Let's Play. However, since you guys have voted that you like the idea of Scooby Doo Warrior re-reviews for the first 10 episodes, I am going to re-review Season 1 Episode 1 as my next video. That will be the next video up. That will be in between the next new Scooby Doo Movies review. And if you guys want to hear my thoughts, you know, see if my opinion has changed and want a more articulate review, come join me for that. I also want to ask you guys something. Since the summer's coming, and I usually do a summer special, would you guys like a whole summer dedicated to the new Scooby Doo movies? If you do, then comment down below, and I will continue with more Season 1 reviews for the summer. And just let me know. Like, if you want a whole summer dedicated to the new Scooby Doo movies, comment down below and let me know. You know, make sure you tell me in this video or the next one so that I know. And I'll totally be on board with it. I would love to tackle the whole, more of the new Scooby Doo movies as part of my summer special. So please let me know if you guys would love that idea of a whole summer dedicated to Scooby Doo. And in my next new Scooby Doo movies review, after the Season 1 Episode 1 re-review of Scooby Doo Where Are You?, I will continue with the new Scooby Doo movies with Season 1 Episode 6 of the new Scooby Doo movies, titled A Good Medium is Rare, guest starring Phyllis Diller. I haven't heard many high hopes or any bad things about the episode, so I'm assuming this is a pretty average one, so I'm not expecting too much out of the Phyllis Diller episode. But we'll see how good it holds up. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be bad, maybe it'll be alright. But will it maintain the high of the new Scooby Doo movies? Will it be a good follow-up to the Don Knotts episode, or will it, you know, will it fail and be a step down? So if you guys want to know my thoughts on that, join me in the video after the Scooby Doo Where Are You re-review, and I'll let you know. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
Scooby Doo, looking for you. Scooby Doo, where are you? the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without you. Scooby, Scooby Doo, Scooby